Okay, evening everybody. Evening everyone in the room and on the Zoom and on the recordings. We almost finished the brachot in the morning. We got as far as הנותן ליעף כוח, and I'm looking at Jeff now because Jeff did some homework a few weeks ago. Excuse me. Jeff did some homework because I asked him a question, and I asked him what is different about the bracha of הנותן ליעף כוח to all the others. Let's first of all say what this bracha means. We bless Hashem, הנותן, who gives, ליעף, to the tired, כוח, strength. Now, Jeff, nice and loud so everybody on the Zoom can hear the difference between that and all the other brachot. Okay, correct. Jeff said correctly that this bracha is the only one of the 15 brachot that we say in the morning that is not quoted in the Gemara. If you remember, we spoke about, one second, Barbara, we spoke about the two different Gemaras that these other brachas come from. There is the Gemara in Brachot 60b, where 10 of them come from. Then we have the 3 that come from Menachot, Shalosani Goy, Shalosani Aved, Shalosani Isha, and there was another one as well, Shalosani Am Haaretz, which we don't say. Well, there was, you know why we don't say it, because, you know, bichalavatala for some people, so you can't say it. And then we have הנותן ליעף כוח, which ends this section of brachot. Now, Jeff is correct in that it does not appear in either of those two Gemaras. So the question is, where does it come from? And why has it found its way into the liturgy? Anybody know where it comes from? It is Mishlei. It is not Mishlei. It is, I will tell you because I've got it, I'm going to share the screen with those people who are on Zoom. The hashachar of Lech Lecha. Oh, I don't know what the hashachar of Lech Lecha is off the top of my head, so I will have to go and get us a chumash ball and show me where it is. Now, if you okay, let's just have a look what Paul said. How do you know that, by the way? Is that your bar mitzvah seder or something? Okay, so Paul was trying to tell us that he knows the whole of Tanakh Peh and every haftarah, and it just happened to pop into his head that the haftarah of Lech Lecha contains הנותן ליעף כוח. But Barbara has spilled the beans of Lech Lecha. Please. Isaiah 40, and you are quite right. Paul is quite right. It comes from Yeshayahu, chapter 29. Okay, let me share the screen. Let me share the screen with those of you who are on Zoom. How can I do this? Well, I've only got one screen. Be able to do it. There we go. There we go. There it is for you on the screen. Tell me when you've got it. Give me a thumbs up, somebody, when you can see the text on the screen. It says it's loading. There we go. You should be able to see it now. Good. It is in Paul Westbrook's bar mitzvah haftarah. Very well remembered, Paul. I'm very impressed. And it says, the Hebrew says, ליעף כוח, ואין עונים עוצמה ירבה. He who gives tired, who gives he increases strength. So it comes from Yeshayahu chapter 40. Now, chapter 40 of Yeshayahu is a very famous chapter, and it is another haftorah. Now, let's see how good Paul is and see if he really does know the whole of Tanakh and every single haftorah. Which haftorah, Paul, from which haftorah takes, it comes from the beginning of chapter 40 in Yeshayahu? Does anybody know? Well, I'd give it away if I told you how it began. It is probably either the most famous haftorah or at least in the top 3. Shiur Yisrael is number 1. No, not Ronnie Vasimchi. Johnny?
I was going to say Ronnie Vasimchi.
Okay, I'll tell you how it begins. There it is on the screen for you. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. Okay, so chapter 40, the haftorah for Parshat Va'etchanan, okay, is Nachamu, Shabbat Nachamu. It comes from chapter 40. Ruby would have known that instantly, of course, but he's not here, so we're having to manage without him. So Nachamu, there it is on the screen for you. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. It's chapter 40. The haftorah for Va'etchanan ends there on verse 27. Koach ish lo ne'edar. That is the end of the haftorah for Va'etchanan. But the 3 psukim later, noten li'ya'ef koach, and that is apparently in the haftorah of Lech Lecha, which I did not know. So between Paul and I, we've managed to get there. So that is where we see that phrase noten li'ya'ef koach. So that's where it comes from. Why is it in this section of brachot? Well, I think that's, let's stop the share there now and go back to the full screen. I think it's there because it sort of fits in, because we've woken up in the morning, we've thanked HaKadosh Baruch for giving us our neshama back, we've thanked him for making us have a good stretch and a yawn, and for the shoes that we put on, and our steps and tzadi gaver, all the things that we spoke about. And so Hanoten LaYav Koach, he's given us back Koach. It's a bit like Elokai Neshama, isn't it? Elokai Neshama is when we say, we went through that a few weeks ago, we say Elokai Neshama, we thank God for giving us back our soul when he's woken us up. That's the spiritual side of things. I think Hanoten LaYav Koach is the physical parallel, if you like. We're thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu here. We go to bed at night and we're tired, we're exhausted, we've worked hard all day, or not, as the case may be, and we go to tired and we wake up in the morning and we've got strength again. That's the cycle of life. It's a bit strange that it's at the end of those brachot. I'll come to you in a sec, Jeff. It's a bit strange that it's at the end of those brachot, because you'd expect it to be right at the beginning or together with Elokai Neshama. But I think it's at the end purely because of what Jeff said before, which is that it doesn't form part of the brachas in the Gemaras. And if Faye was here, she would tell you that in the Nusach Ari, it is not the last bracha, it's in the middle. And Noten LaYav Koach is in the middle in the Nusach Ari, and I can't explain that at all. But the Ari is very, very important with this bracha of a Noten LaYav Koach, and I'll tell you why in a minute once Jeff has.
He indicated that 15 is quite an important number because it's ascending.
Shiur Malot. Okay, let me just say to everyone here, because they won't be able to hear. Interesting. So Jeff's know there's 15 Shiur Hamalot. It went up into the Bet HaMikdash. 15 is, well, perhaps it was just put into, not just put in, but
big enough to get me up in the day.
So it completes the cycle, and it completes the cycle by saying, thank you for giving us strength for the rest of the day. That fits in.
That was the Talmud Google.
Talmud Google. Okay, well, Talmud Google, I think, has got a fair point there. But the question I'm going to, Barbara, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
I just want to ask really, why is it different from all the others in that it's anote? All the others are oter and ozer and
That's interesting. Okay, so Barbara, it's not hanote, no. Barbara asks the question, why is there who gives as opposed to he gives, or I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know. Hanotein liavkech, the one who gives. No idea. It's a good question. I will try and make some inquiries and look things up. We'll ask Professor Google for a start, and if he doesn't know, then we'll go and ask a proper rabbi. Okay, I don't know. It's a good question. Well spotted. Now, the next question I want to ask about Hanotein liavkech is if it doesn't appear in the Gemara. When did it get inserted into the Tefillot? Now, there is a difference of opinion as to when it was first inserted. How do we know when things were inserted? Well, we can only tell that by finding manuscripts where it wasn't. Okay. And we can say, well, okay, at the time when this manuscript was written, it wasn't there. And there are two opinions as to who or when or this bracha not only of koach was added into these brachot. One opinion is that it was added into by the Savoraim. Does anybody know who the Savoraim were? And that the reason that I'm telling you this is as part of an opportunity to go through the various different periods in Jewish history. Have you ever heard of the Savoraim? Anyone? Anyone on Zoom here heard of the Savoraim? No. Okay. Well, you'll all have heard of the Tanaim, right? Tanaim were at the time of the. When were the Tanaim? Mishnah, correct. The time of the Mishnah. The Mishnah. Okay. Anybody who's mentioned in the Mishnah, usually he is a Tana. Tanaim. The time of the Gemara, they were called Amoraim. Okay, the Amoraim. Tana, the word Tana comes from the taf and the shin are interchangeable in Hebrew and Aramaic. So change the taf to a shin, what do you get? Shana. What does Shana mean? It doesn't mean a year.
Learning.
Learning. Very good, Johnny. Mishnah. Okay. And why is it called that? It comes from Shani. To say it again, second time.
So they're doing the Mishnayot.
Mishnayot, same word. Okay. No. So a Tana is from the Mishnah, which makes sense because Mishnah and Tana is the same word. Just the taf and the shin are interchangeable. So the Tana comes from the Tanaim was the time of the Mishnah. And what period of time was that in the calendar? In the bit earlier, about 200. The Mishnah was redacted by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Judah the Prince, around about 200. After that came the period of the Amoraim, who were the people who wrote the Gemara, or the people who are mentioned in the Gemara, and they are called Amoraim because they comes from the word Amor, to speak, to discuss. Correct. The Gemara was a bunch of rabbis sitting around discussing what? The Mishnah. They're called Amoraim. You will have also heard, but might not know exactly when it was, you'll have heard of the period of the Geonim. Yeah, you've heard of the Geonim. Anyone know when the period of the Geonim were? Gemara, first of all, when was the period of the Amoraim? When was the Gemara written? Yes, about 400-500 the Gemara was written. So the Amoraim are about 400 or 500 CE we're talking about here, of course. So Mishnah around about 200, Gemara, Amoraim around about 400-500. Geonim were 600, around about 600. Okay, they're called the Geonim, and you'll have heard of some of them, Reb Sadia Gaon, those kind of people. The Geonim were around about 600. Then you get the period of the Rishonim. Who were the Rishonim? They were the medieval commentators. Who's the most famous of all? Rashi is the most famous of all the Rishonim. Rambam is a Rishon. Ramban is a Rishon. And then Rishon meaning first, it means the early commentators. They were the commentators. What does the Geonim mean? I didn't go through that. What's a Gaon? Yeah, genius. A Gaon is a genius.
Expert.
The Vilna Gaon, yeah. I remember my rabbi in Manchester used to talk about rabbinic inflation. He says when he was a lad, if you were a rabbi, you were harav, right? As time went on, then you had to be harav hagaon. Everybody was harav hagaon, right? And now it's harav hagaon tzaddik. Okay, so it's this rabbinic inflation. He says to be a gaon, you have to be a Vilna Gaon. You know, all these people that you see, you know, advertised giving a drosha, harav hagaon. He says it's just rabbinic inflation. But a gaon means a genius. Okay, so the Geonim were these the period after the Amoraim, and what did? They were sort of a bridge between the Amoraim and the Rishonim. The Rishonim were the first early commentators, Rashi, Rambam, Ramban, those kind of people, to the Acharonim, the later commentators. So those would be the later commentators like the Malbim, as it was about 150, 200 years ago, and the Chofetz Chaim, Mishnah Brura, all those kind of people. Those are Acharonim. Okay, and then after that you come to the contemporary poskim and contemporary parashanim. So where do the Savoraim fit in? Well, they fit in between the Amoraim and the Geonim. Okay, so it's a short period of time between about 500 and 600, that 100-year period. Were called the Savoraim. And one opinion, and it's not really held up by scrutiny, to be honest, as you'll see in a minute. One opinion is that Hanothen Layoaf Koach was inserted by the Savoraim, and I don't actually know what the basis for that. There's an article here that I found about Hanothen Layoaf Koach, which basically says there is no basis for that opinion at all. It is an opinion, but there's no basis for it. And the earliest source that we find for Hanothen Layoaf Koach is actually in a poem by the Ibn Ezra. You've heard of the Ibn Ezra? Ibn Ezra was a Rishon. He lived in the 12th century. He died in 1167. As his name suggests, he was Spanish, correct? He was part of the sort of, golden age of what was known as the golden age of Spain. And this poem includes a brief allusion to each of the morning blessings. And it's clear from this poem that he writes, and if you want to know where it can be found, it's called Shirei HaKodesh Shel Avraham Ibn Ezra. There was a book written about it by Rabbi Y. Levin. I don't know who he was, but it's in there. And this poem written by the Ibn Ezra speaks about all the brachot of the morning prayers in poetic form, including Hanothen Layoaf Koach. And that's the first indication that we have. So the earliest indication that we have, that's not to say that it wasn't there earlier, we just haven't got any earlier sources that it was anything earlier than the 12th century. But what we do find, and this is what I said before, that it is not in the Siddur of Reb Sadia Gaon. Okay, Reb Sadia Gaon died in 942. Okay, so it was not in his Siddur. Now, his Siddur is one of the main sources that we have for Nusach Ashkenaz Tefillot. Nor is it in the Siddur of Rav Amram, who was a similar sort of period of time. And it's also absent from the Rokeach, who lived in the end of the 12th century, early 13th century. It's absent from the Rambam, and it is absent from the earliest manuscripts of the Machzor Vitri, which you may have heard of. The Machzor Vitri is a very famous Machzor. It's in the Cairo Geniza, one of the manuscripts from this, one of the very earliest prayer books. So that dates from the early 12th century. So it seems that prior to the 12th century, it doesn't seem to be there. It's beginning to be there in the 12th century, but not across the board. So it seems to be a much, much later prayer. When was all the other ones instituted? Well, we know that, don't we? Because they're from the Gemara. So they're from the period of the Amoraim. So they date from at least 500 and earlier probably. So you can see that Hanothen Le'Yoav Koach is very significant. I mean, it's still old. Don't get me wrong. You know, we're talking 1,000 years ago. Not many prayers have stood the test of 1,000 years, but it's significantly younger than the others. Now, does that mean that everybody says this prayer? Now, looking around this room and on the Zoom, I don't know who 845002 is on Zoom, but everybody else, I think, are Ashkenazim here, and would daven with either Nusach Ashkenaz or Nusach Sfard of Ashkenazim, like we daven here in this shul, and like Johnny davened in his shul in Manchester. And we all say Hanothen Le'Yoav Koach. There are some minhagim that omit Hanothen Le'Yoav Koach, and there's a massive machloket amongst the Sephardi poskim as to whether you should say it or not. Shulchan Aruch himself, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, who we all sort of consider to be the definitive halachic decisor, which is not actually true, but we often we talk about it like that. The Shulchan Aruch himself says you shouldn't say it. How about that? Now, he then goes back and says, later on, says, well, okay, lots of people say it, so it's okay to say it. Now, it got popularity and it became much more widespread because the Ari. Remember, I said to you before about Nusach Ari. The Ari is important in Hanothen Le'Yoav Koach because the Ari was very firm that it should be said, and of course the Ari was the instigator, if you like, of Hasidic Judaism. All the Hasidim follow the Ari, and so it became much more popular to be said amongst Sephardim as well. And then he goes on to say that this article here asks the question, so how did Hanothen Le'Yoav Koach become an almost universally accepted blessing today, even in non-Ashkenazic communities? And he concludes that it's all because of the Ari did it, and this helped blessing spread amongst Sephardic Jewry and among the Kabbalists. Of course, the Ari was a big Kabbalist. So despite the earlier objection of the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo, and in fact, there is a tradition that Rabbi Yosef Karo withdrew his objection when he heard that the Ari supported it. Now, it's another interesting, the Bach, who lived in the 17th century, has a much more straightforward answer as to why we should say it. And he says, the Gemara that we have is faulty, and there was bits missing out. Now, we know that to be the case, don't we? We do know that there are different versions of the Gemara. There is supposedly an unabridged and uncensored version of the Gemara, where? In Rome, in the Vatican, somewhere deep in the bowels of the Vatican, with all sorts of other things, perhaps, yes. And so we do know that there are different versions of the Gemara, and the Bach says that he thinks that the original version of the Gemara did have this bracha in it. So that's very interesting. So there's another bracha, which we don't find, which is included in this list of brachot, which nobody says. And that is Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, magbia shefalim, who magbia, what's hagba? Who lifts up shefalim, the low people. Shefilah, where's the Shefilah? Shefilah is part of the country, right? It's the lowlands. Shefilah is the lowlands. Yes, you should say that bracha, magbia shefalim. Okay, and although this blessing is not found in the Gemara, it is mentioned in the Geonic sources. So interestingly, the Geonic sources of the 9th century, Rav Amram and various others, have this bracha of magbia shfalim, but don't have a noten le'yoav koach. And yet, noten le'yoav koach got in, and magbia shfalim was out. And it seems that the key to this is the Ari, who supported the bracha of Anoten Le'av Koach. Yes, Jeff.
There's almost brachas of 16 that could have been in the top 15. It talks about who removes sleep from my eyes.
We're going to come right onto that now.
So why isn't that part?
Okay. Okay, let me just tell everyone what Jeff's question was. Jeff's question was, what about the next section, which begins with a bracha, which looks like it belongs in the previous section. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, ha'ma'avir sheina me'einai u'tenuma me'afapoi. Blessed you are Hashem, who removes the sleep from my eyes and the slumber from my eyelids. Now, that looks, doesn't it? Jeff is absolutely right. It looks like it belongs in that section. Where would you say that? You'd say that right at the beginning, wouldn't you? You'd say, I think I would put it, if I was making this up, shows you what I know, I would put it immediately before Poker Chivrim, who makes the blind see, right? Because, you know, you're moving the sleep from your eyes and the slumber from your eyelids, and then you can see. So I think the answer to your question is why it's not part of that is Poker Chivrim itself. And that Poker Chivrim is taken care of. Yeah, it's taken care of. And the Gemara mentions Poker Chivrim, but doesn't mention this. This question still remains as why we say it, because Poker Chivrim is not exactly the same. But I think that's why it's not where I want to put it. Art Scroll, what does Art Scroll say about that bracha? Let's have a look.
Doesn't say anything about it in mine.
Doesn't say anything. I think the Koran said something about it, Paul. Have a look in the Koran. I looked at the Koran earlier on today, but I've forgotten what it says. So that is so that's Hanoten Le'av Koach. I think we've covered Hanoten Le'av Koach quite nicely there. What's really interesting is that I don't know about any of you, I didn't know any of all of that it wasn't in the Gemara or it was such a later addition. Now, does it really matter? Nothing really matters as long as you say it and you say it with kavanah. But it's interesting. I think it's fascinating.
I think it's nice, Johnny, that the brachas start with mental health. They give us so we can distinguish between day and night, and they finish with physical health.
Interesting. That's a very interesting point. Because we said that earlier on, didn't we? We said that there was a parallel of Anoten Le'av Koach being the physical side and Elokai Neshama, which comes before, being the spiritual and mental side. And that actually fits in with the next section of Vihi Ratzon. But first of all, Paul's going to read to us what the Koran says.
For the blessings which we are surrounded, we conclude by asking for his help, dedicating our life to his service, undeterred by obstacles that may stand in our way.
Okay, so actually what Paul has just said is that after we've thanked God for all our surroundings, for the shoes and the walking and the opening our eyes and our stretching and the yawning and all the other things that we've been talking about last few weeks. Now we ask God to help us get over the obstacles that are coming our way. Now, the bracha of Hamaveh Sheina Me'einai, who removes sleep from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids, does not do that. What that is referring to is the next bit, which is attached to this bracha. Now, the next bit is, what do we say? We say this bracha, who blesses, who removes the sleep from our eyes and the slumber from our eyelids. And then what do we say? We say, Vihi Ratzon. How would you translate Vihi Ratzon? Frank? No, Vihi Ratzon. And let it be your will.
Yeah.
Right? It's connected. Have a look in your Siddur. Everybody's got a Siddur in front of them. Have a look and see. You would expect the bracha of Hamaveh Sheina Me'einai Utnuma Me'af Apoi, full stop, new paragraph, would you not? That's what you'd expect, because the next paragraph is not talking about sleep or slumber. It's talking about something else, which we'll come on to in a minute. But there is no paragraph. It's connected. It's there's a full stop there, but it's connected. It's all one paragraph, and that's why it's got the vav in front of it, Vihi Ratzon, and may it be your will, because the you've not got a vav. You got
The next paragraph.
yeah. You've got a vav there, yeah. Okay, so that is all one paragraph. The bracha about taking sleep from your eyes and slumber from your eyelids, and the next bit that we're going to go through now is connected, and it's connected by that vav for a reason. And I think once we've gone through this paragraph, we'll understand what Hama'avir Sheina Me'einai Utnuma Me'af Apoi means, because it must be connected to what we're about to say, because the printers have deliberately, and they're not just saving space by not making it a separate paragraph, it's there. And by the way, if you hear somebody saying these brachot and you're in shul and you hear them say Hamaveh Sheina Me'einai Utnuma Me'af Apoi, do not say Amen, because that's not the end of the bracha. It's all one bracha. This whole next section is one bracha. Maybe your will, as is common in all prayers. It doesn't say anything here in my art scroll, but it's all one prayer. So if you hear somebody say "Hanothen leYoef koach," you can say Amen. You hear somebody say "Hamaveh Sheina Me'einai Utnuma Me'af Apoi," you don't say Amen until they get to the end of that section, which finishes off with Gomel Chasadim Tovim Le'amo Yisrael. Then you can say your Amen. It's all one bracha. Where do we see that as well?
Shema.
Shema begins with a bracha and ends with bracha as well. You're right. But I was thinking of which will come on sooner too.
Baruch She'amah.
Baruch She'amah. Start Baruch She'amah. I know we're jumping, but let's just have a quick look. What does Baruch She'amah begin with? Baruch She'amah begins with Baruch, and then we've got a Baruch Atah Hashem in there somewhere. At the end, yes. There in the middle, there we go. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, ha'elav ha'rachman ha'avon. You don't say Amen until you say the end bit, Baruch Atah Hashem melech me'olal b'tishbachot. So it's the same thing. This bracha of Ma'aveh Sheina Me'einai is all one bracha, which ends with Hagomel Chasadim. I said Hagomel. Now, what does your siddur say? Gomel. Does anybody's siddur say Hagomel? What does yours say? Hagomel. Okay, Nusach Sfad. Johnny, what do you say?
Hagomel in the Art Scroll Safad.
Okay, Art Scroll Safad.
I don't use that. I use the Koran, which says Gomel.
Okay, so Nusach Ashkenaz is Gomel, and Nusach Safard is Hagomel. Now, that's another question, isn't it, Barbara? That adds the sort of the same question as yours. I don't know the answer to that.
Nusach Safard is Gomer without the hay. The Koren Nusach Safard without the hay.
Without the hay, that's interesting because
Yeah.
Nusach Sfard in Art Scroll is with,
Wow, okay.
and Nusach Sfard in the Rinat Yisrael is also with. I'm just going to go and check the Nusach Ashkenaz Rinat. Here we have a Nusach Ashkenaz Rinat Yisrael. What does that say? Making a big fuss about one letter, but it's interesting. Hagomel. So there you go. I don't know. We'll have to work it out.
This
So,
Safard
the
also
important-
Hagomel, Johnny. That's also Hagomel.
Oh, Hagomel, Tefilah Kolper. Okay.
Yeah.
So the point being that this is all one bracha. So in order to understand the beginning of the bracha, we have to go through the middle of the bracha and get to the end of the bracha to understand what we're talking about here. So let's do that now. He who removes sleep from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids. Let's just put that to the side. We're not sure what it means yet. V'hi ratzon, and may it be your will. Milafanecha, before you. May it be your will before you. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our God, Elokei Avotenu, and the God of our fathers. What are we asking for? Yehi ratzon is a request. Okay? You'll say Yehi ratzon, whatever it is. May it be your will. That is a bakasha. It is a request from Hashem. May it be your will, Hashem, that I win the lottery next week. Right? Yehi ratzon, wherever. So what are we asking for? We're asking for something. Shetargilenu b'toratecha. Targilenu. What word can you see in the middle of that?
Regel.
Regel. Okay. What is a regel?
A festival. A festival.
It's a foot. Regel is a foot. You're right.
A foot
It's also
festival.
a festival. Foot festival. What did you say, Goldie? To get used to. Yes. If you are ragil to something, you get used to something. Ani ragil larutz. I am accustomed to, I get used to running, right? Or whatever it is. Ragil. Why is ragil used to something? Because it's something that you do regularly. Okay, maybe that's where the word comes from. Regularly, I don't know. Yeah, maybe that's the source of the word regularly. I don't know. But anyway, shetargilenu b'toratecha. May it be your will that we become accustomed, get used to Toratecha, your Torah. So, yeah, targil is an exercise. Targil is an exercise. That's right. So we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we should have success in becoming used to working with his Torah and living with his Torah. V'dabkeinu b'mitzvotecha. Yeah, we're asking him to help us to become accustomed. That's exactly the point, Paul. Yes, it's a request. May you, God, help us or make us become accustomed to your Torah. V'dabkeinu, what's to cleave? To cleave. What is a modern Hebrew word that you know that comes from that? Maybe you don't know. Barbara says devek. What does that mean? Glue. Devek is glue. Yes. So v'dabkeinu, we should cleave. We should stick to like glue. B'mitzvot or mitzvot. I've just had a flashback to my youth when I used to play football. My old man used to say to me when I was a defender and I was marking somebody, he used to say, stick to him like glue. Just had a flashback. Okay. So v'dabkeinu b'mitzvotecha, we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us. Now, why are we asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us to do something? Because it's not that easy. If it was that easy, we wouldn't need any help. It's difficult. Well, this is a recognition that, we need assistance. We're expressing the desire and we need HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help to stick with the Torah, to keep the mitzvahs. Now, here comes the bit that you read out, Paul, which was referring to this next bit. Va'al tavi'enu, and do not bring us. You can see the word bo in the middle of that word, yeah? Beit aleph, bo, meaning come. Okay, al tavi'enu, do not bring us lo lidei, not into the hand of sin. Double negatives, by the way, in Hebrew are not positives like they are in English. If you translated that absolutely literally, it would be, and do not bring us not into sin, which would mean that do bring us into sin, because a double negative is a positive in English. It's not in Hebrew. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, do not bring us into the hand of sin. Lo lidei. You can see the word yad in there, yeah? Don't bring us into the hand of sin. In other words, don't bring us into a situation where sin can grab us by the hand and schlep us in. V'lo lidei avera, not into iniquity, another type of sin. V'avon, that's another type of sin. Chet, avera, avon, these are all different types of sin. Where do we see all those different types of sin? Yeah, in vidui, exactly. In vidui, when we say vidui, either in Tachanun or we say vidui in Rosh Hashanah, in Yom Kippur, we have all the different types of sin, where there's chet, pesha, avon, avera. They're all different levels of sin. Some are deliberate, some are by accident, some are done out of a rebellious nature, some are just done because we've not got any willpower. Whatever it is, we're asking God to help us avoid these things. Day nisayon. Nisayon. What is nisayon? A test. Nisayon is a test. Nisayon also in modern Hebrew has very other experience. Yes, if you have nisayon, means experience. And why does it mean experience? Because you've tested over and over again. You've tested yourself and you have experience. So nisayon in modern Hebrew also means nisayon is temptation. Okay. Who's that? That's Corin, is it? Art Scroll says challenge. Art Scroll says challenge. That's interesting. And nisayon is a challenge, a test. Gold.
I know it is.
Yeah, Goldie said test. Well, that's the same as a challenge, isn't it? A test is a challenge.
That it's something you want to possibly avoid. Challenge is something that you want to fight.
I suppose it depends on what the challenge is. Yeah, I think challenge can be both ways. Temptation is, generally speaking, a negative thing. I agree. You don't. Yeah, generally speaking, if you don't want to be brought into temptation, then isn't that in the Lord's Prayer? Yeah.
Lead us not into
bring us not. I remember
temptation.
From school, yeah. But I always just, I know my bit dodgy hearing. I used to think they bring us not into Trent Station. Anyway, temptation. You're right. Yeah, our Father who art in our Father who art in heaven, bring us not.
Isn't the word nes in there as well, Johnny?
Nes. Yes, I suppose it is. How do we get miracle to experience or test? Maybe if you overcome a test, could be a nes. I don't know. Look, it must be connected somewhere there, Johnny. It's too much of a coincidence. So we're asking God not to give us temptation here. Don't bring us into sin, we've said. And you know what? Don't tempt us to do a sin. This is at the beginning of our day. This is how we were meant to begin our day. This is what you read out there, Paul, in that commentary, is exactly what we're talking about here. So we say to God, please help us become accustomed to the Torah, help us stick to the mitzvahs, and keep us away from Avera, and even keep us away from temptation. V'lo lidei bizayon. What is a bizayon? If somebody says that is in Yiddish we'd say it's a bizayon. What's a bizayon, Goldie? You must have heard of that.
I don't know.
You don't know that?
No.
I thought you might have known that. Disgrace. It's a bizayon. It's a disgrace. I remember famously there was a a famous a Dayan in London got himself into a big bit of bother by saying a few years ago that women dancing with the Sefer Torah on Simchas Torah was a bizoyon.
My phone would be upset.
Yeah, so he got himself in a bit of hot water for that. But that's what bizayon means. So we're asking God again, keep us away from disgrace. In other words, let us not do things which will bring disgrace upon us. Now, how is he going to do that? How are we going to avoid, how is HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to help us avoid all these different types of sins, temptation, and disgrace? How? Read on the next few words. Ve'al tashlet banu yetzer hara. What is tashlet?
We've got
Who is the
Yishlot.
sholet?
Johnny Owl says Yishlot. Yishlot, Owl says,
Yishlot?
not Tashlot.
Okay, so that's interesting. Yishlot is the masculine version.
Ah,
Ishlot is the feminine version, and it's yetzer hara. So that depends on whether you think the evil inclination is masculine or feminine. According to this, tishlot, it must be feminine. Otherwise, it would be yishlot, as Johnny's got. Which siddur is that in, Johnny?
I'm looking in the art scroll, an old art scroll.
And I've got an art scroll Ashkenaz which says tishlot. What have you got? Okay, Goldie's got yishlot in the Rinat Yisrael.
Yeah.
Tashlet. Okay, well, it's definitely that's also feminine. Anyway, it comes from the word sholet, to rule. Okay, the sholet is to rule, a ruler. Okay, Yosef was the sholet al Mitzrayim. He was the ruler over Mitzrayim. So al tashlet banu yetzer hara. Do not allow the yetzer hara, the evil inclination, to rule banu, over us. So we've said to God, help us not do a sin. And now we're saying, and the way you can help us is help us not to allow the yetzer hara, the evil inclination, because at the end of the day, why do we give in to temptation? For whatever reason it is, whether it's a temptation to eat something you shouldn't, do something you shouldn't, say something you shouldn't, because there's an urge in us to do it, isn't it? Otherwise, that's what a temptation is. Temptation is an urge to do something. Yetzer hara is just an urge to do something bad. I have this yetzer hara, it's like, right inside of me. It's a real human being inside of me, sort of making me do it. No, it's my urges. It's my willpower. So al tashlet banu yetzer hara. Don't allow my urges to do bad things to rule over me. Let me, in other words, be the ruler over my bad urges. Yes, Barbara.
Sorry, but it must be masculine because it's yetzer hara and yetzer hatov.
Yeah, so it would be. It would be. So why is it tashlet? Tishlot. Is it? I don't know. We could do with Ruby here. Where's Ruby when we need him? Anyway, it means to rule over. Yishlot, but you've got yishlot, which would be the masculine future tense.
Is it imperative?
Tashlet. Yes, it is an imperative. You're right. But al yishlot would be the future tense. Okay. All right. Yes, you're right. You're right. It's not tishlot. It's tashlet. You're right. And the reason and it does say tashlet in front of me, but it's very little writing, and my eyes are not as great as they should be. So I misread it. Okay. So we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't allow the yetzer hara to overcome us, to rule over us. Okay.
Our strength of character, doesn't it?
It says.
We're asking for all these things.
Okay, Barbara says it doesn't say much for our strength of character, and it doesn't.
Every morning.
It doesn't say much for our strength of character. It does say much for our honesty and our acceptance of our weaknesses and our lack of strength of character. So yeah, perhaps there are people who wouldn't need to say that, but I mean, I certainly would need to say it every morning. and would need to say it with more kavanah than I do. So how are we? This is all one thing follows on from another. This is not just random words said in any old random order. What have we said so far? Let's just recap. May it be your will, our God, that you make us stick to the Torah. You help us keep the mitzvot. You prevent us from coming into the clutches, lidei, from the hand, the clutches of sin. And how are you going to do that? Don't allow the Yetzer Hara to overcome us, to overpower us, to rule over us. And how are we going to do that? Read on. V'harchikenu me Adam ra. What word can you see in there? Rachok. Distance. Keep us far away from. V'harchikenu. Keep us distant from. Keep us far away. Now, who are we going to keep far away from? What are we going to keep far away from? With the help of God? May Adam ra. From a bad person. Now, is it not true that when we are in the company of bad people, we often find that our urges to do bad things are greater than when we are around good people? Yeah, if you're in good company, you tend to behave well. If you're in bad company, you tend to behave badly. And it's not rocket science, it's just human nature. So this prayer here, this Yehi Ratzon that we're saying, is a prayer, I think, for human nature, for God to help us with our human nature. And it all follows on one from the other. Yes, Barbara.
Sorry, on the other hand, could we not be influencing the Adam Ra?
Oh,
Or if we're
okay. So the question is, that's a good question. Barbara says, and I'm going to come to ask you another question in a minute. Barbara says that if we distance ourselves from bad people, then we are missing an opportunity to make those bad people good, because we are good people. Yeah, that's the end of Kirov. Okay. Now, there is, we had a big debate here in Shiur a few weeks ago about the fact that allegedly Yaakov was punished for not allowing Dinah to be seen by Esav. Remember, there's a midrash that says Yaakov hid Dinah in a box when he met Esav, when he met up with Esav after 22 years in the house of Lavan. And the midrash says he did that because he didn't want Esav to see her and want to marry her, and then he would, she would marry Esav. And the Mefarshim are there critical of Jacob and say, it's not right. You missed an opportunity. Exactly what you've just said, Barbara. You missed an opportunity. Maybe Dinah would have made Esav into a better person. And you, Yaakov, are culpable for avoiding that. And I'm not the greatest Yaakov fan, as you probably will have gathered from some of my shiurim. But on this occasion, I think that's extremely harsh. Who wants their daughter to marry a Rosha? Nobody wants their daughter to marry a Rosha. Of course he's going to hide her away. I would have done exactly the same. So I think that was a bit harsh on Yaakov. But the point that you make, Barbara, is made by many of the Mefarshim on that particular episode of Yaakov hiding away Dinah from Esav.
I think a Rosha wants his daughter to marry a Rosha. A Rosha
maybe.
wants it to...
maybe a Rosha would want his daughter to marry a Rosha. Yes, that could be.
This is the casual, where you're going deliberately out of your way to try and influence them. But this is going about our normal day-to-day business.
Yeah. I think that's right. Frank has made an important distinction there, which answers Barbara's question a bit, and that is that this prayer is not talking about Kirov workers, otherwise they'd be out of a job. It's talking about, as Frank very nicely put it, the casual association with bad people. Keep us away from bumping into bad people or coming into contact with them and getting influenced by them. So, V'harchikenu me Adam, keep us a casual. Very important that you mentioned that, because look at the next bit. Keep us away from the casual meeting of a bad person. Frank, read it out for us. Umechavera, and from a bad friend. Now, that's less casual, isn't it? Because he's your friend. But what is a bad friend? A bad friend is not somebody that you know is a bad friend, would he? He's somebody that you think is a friend, but he's not good for you. Either he's not good for you because he's a bad influence on you. How many times did I get told that when I was a kid? Don't mix with him, he's a bad influence. Or, you know, other kids were told about me, don't mix with him because he's a bad influence, right? We've all done it, haven't we? Either to our own children or had it said about us, right? So this mechavera is a bad friend, is a friend who does not do what is good for you. You may think he's a friend, but others, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself knows better. So we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for deeper insight here, aren't we, really? We're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for us to be able to recognize when somebody is a chaver ra, then to distance ourselves from that bad friend. And then we've got the opposite. Read on. V'dabkeinu b'yetzer hatov. Okay? And to stick, devek, that's that glue again, stick like glue again, to what? Yetzer hatov, to stick with a good intention. So I think it's important that this verb here is to stick with, because yetzer hatov, we've all got yetzer hatov, we've all got good inclination, we've all got good intentions. You know, there's not many people who are intrinsically bad. Most people want to be good. Most people have intentions to be good. Don't always work out because we don't, with our intentions, we don't stick with our good intentions. So at the beginning of the day, we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Dabkeinu b'yetzer hatov, give us a bit of assistance here in sticking with the difficult things that we set ourselves to do, which are good things to do, because sometimes it's hard to do good things. Somebody says something horrible to you, and you have that yetzer hara to answer back with an equally nasty barb. It's difficult to then use your yetzer hatov and smile sweetly at them and say something nice. And we need help for that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that. And the corollary of that, if you are able, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to stick with the yetzer hatov, what will you end up doing? Next words, tovim. You'll end up doing good deeds. So this prayer, gosh, we've done an hour already. Gosh, time flying, enjoying yourself. This prayer is such an important prayer at the beginning of the day, because we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to set on the right path. Let's go. Let's just finish this. Let's section off. V'chet yitzreinu v'chof v'chof. What does that mean? V'chof.
Strengthen. Is it strength? No. Strengthen.
What does, we've said it already in the brachot. Kof is a monkey, yes. Bent over, yeah. Kof means, we've said it, zokef, kefufim, same word. So v'chof means to bend. Bend et yitzreinu, bend our inclination. In other words, bend our will. Lehishtabed lach. Lehishtabed. What word can you see?
Aved, to serve you. Aved, to serve you.
Eved, which
Eved,
means
to serve.
yeah,
Servant.
so lehishtabed is a reflex. It means serve. So v'chof et yitzreinu, and bend our will. In other words, help us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to mold our yetzer, our inclination, our desires. Help us, desires to serve you. And then, if we can do that, we will then be able to say the end of this bit, Utanenu hayom, and therefore we ask, Utanenu, give us 10, to give, nu us, and give us hayom, uvachol yom, and every day, chen, grace, chesed, kindness, rachamim, mercy, be'einecha, in your eyes. Okay, but not just in your eyes. Who else? Uve'einei kol ro'enu, and in the eyes of everybody who sees us. We are asking. This is, if we could only say one prayer in the entire day, this is it. This wonderful prayer. We're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us stick with his Torah, to avoid bad people, avoid bad habits, avoid temptation, to give us favor, grace, and mercy from you and from everybody that sees us. V'tigmalenu chasadim tovim. V'tigmalenu gomel chasadim tovim. What does gomel mean?
To pay us. Pay us. Redeem.
Yeah,
Redeem.
to make, to do. That's goel with an aleph. This is gomel. Gimel mem lam.
Okay.
Lamed, gimel mem lamed means to give or to bestow. Gomel chasadim tovim, to give us good kindness. The kindnesses can there be other than good kindnesses? Can you have bad kindnesses? Yes. When can you have a bad kindness? Well, yes. Or when you're a grandparent and you give your grandchildren all the stuff that you shouldn't be giving in them, but because you're a grandparent, you give it them, and the parents say to you, like today when we went out for lunch with my grandchildren, and I bought them a sugary drink, and their mother was not all that chuffed, to be honest. That was not a chesed tov, either, apparently. A prostitute is a zonah or a kadesha, holiness. Yeah, it's a bit of a euphemism. So chasadim tovim, we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for chasadim tovim. We're asking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all the kindnesses that he should do to us, should actually be good ones for our benefit. And then we end the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, Gomel or Hagomel, chasadim tovim li'amo Yisrael, who does good kindnesses to his people Israel. So it's a beautiful, beautiful prayer. And it's fitting that should be, I think, the culmination of, if you like, it's the end of the beginning. It's the end of the beginning of our day. We've begun our day, we've woken up, we've thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for our seichel, that we know it's night and not day, and we haven't got dementia. We've thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the ability to get out of bed and walk and see and stretch and dress and all those other things, and wash our hands. And we've thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for gvura, for strength. And then we say, okay, now we're about to start our day. I read somewhere, I can't remember exactly what the words were, but I read somewhere a beautiful expression that said, every single day is a minefield of opportunity and potential disaster. So, we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us through what's coming for the day. And if you could say no other prayer in the day, that would be a good one to say.
The reality is, what if you got to go really quickly?
It is a problem. I can't deny it. And you know what? Until I started to think about this series of shiurim, I couldn't understand how Tefilah could take so long for some people. I remember my son Dan, when he first went to Gates of Yeshiva, and he came back on Rosh Hashanah, and he said that it started at 7:30 and finished at 4:30. Like 7 hours for davening on Rosh Hashanah. What on earth were they doing? But actually, if you are at that madrega that you could do this, it takes a long time.
Well, we can actually say this slightly slower. Not I do everything, but
Frank says you can say it before you come to shul. And actually, I listened to know where we were up to in the shiur before I came out tonight. I listened to the end of the last shiur, and one of the last things that we said was that there are some groups of people, Moroccans particularly, who dafka say it at home. And the best way to do this is to say it before the shliach tzibur, say it on your own, at your own pace, understand it, and then say amen to his bracha when he says it. And there's no question about it. If a person was to daven the way we are learning this Tefilah here now, you would start in the morning and it would take you till Mincha to get through to the end of Shacharis. And I'm not suggesting that it is possible to do that. But what it is possible to do is to pick one bracha a day and say, you know what, that bracha today I'm going to do with Kavanah. I spoke about that today in between Mincha and Mariv here, because I just happened to pick out the kids of Shulchan Aruch about the dinim of brachot. And I said to everybody who was just in the shul, I said, let's all just concentrate really well on the first bracha of Shemona Esrei that we're going to say now. Just that first one. And let's say it properly and slowly and understand every word of it. You're right. We're living in a world where we've got, stuff to do. We don't live in a world where we can spend morning saying shacharit. We can't. But we can do better than we can do, I think. I can anyway, I speak for myself. Okay. So, right, let me finish on that point. Thank you. So what do I think? And I haven't read this anyway. This is my own view. So take it, leave it kind of thing. I think that when it says, take the sleep from my eyes, or we bless God for taking the sleep from my eyes and the slumber from my eyelids, I am, because of where it is and because it's connected to what we've just gone through, I think what it's saying is, God, open up my eyes. Open up my eyes metaphorically to what's going on in the world. Open up my eyes to the challenges. Open up my eyes to who's an Adam Ra and who's a Chaver Ra. Open up my eyes to what's a Yetzer Tov. Open up my eyes to all of these things that we're going to go to in the next thing. I think I see that as a sort of a metaphorical statement, because it's not in the right place to be physical. If it was physical, it would be before Pokei Chivrim. So it's just an idea that I had, and take it or leave it. Yes, Frank.
Sorry, at the beginning, to emphasize the above, that you make sure that it's one bracha. Get my head around that what appears to be the bracha bit of its own is in the first person singular, and then the rest of that paragraph in the first person plural. Why are we then in the two?
Good question. Good question. Let me tell everyone on the recording and on Zoom what the question was. Frank points out that Hamaveh Shenei Me'enai is in the singular, who removes sleep from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids. And then we go into the plural. Keep us attached to the Torah. All the way it is plural. That's a very good observation, Frank. You have homework to find out why by next week.
You wake up as an individual, but then you're part of the
Paul's answer, good answer to start with, the top of his head, that you wake up as an individual and then you become part of society as you move on.